that then. Cool.
Amazing. Hello, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Penultimate week of the incubator. Well done for coming this far. Now, today we've got a really special and amazing session with the incredible Karthik Kavhan Poduval, who is an incredible human being, a beautiful artist, an amazing musician, and his like journeys and journeying through geographies of music, culture, creativity can be felt and rendered really palpable in the music that he makes, whether that be the music that he makes with Flamingods or his own solo projects, including Mera Bhai. There's something really, really beautiful, authentic, something that kind of transcends the boundaries and the borders of race, class, sexuality, gender. There's something accessible and universal in the music that he makes, which I think is a really, really special thing to kind of to sit with and to craft. So thank you, Karthik, for the amazing music that you have gifted the world with. And you're gonna unfurl like your navigation of the music industry, the different spaces that you've found yourself in, the politics of those spaces, the kind of the different dynamics that you've had to encounter. And I guess one thing that we're kind of exploring quite deeply within this space is how to kind of, you know, maintain your political identity within spaces which might be so kind of incongruent with your landscape of like kind of political ideology, right? So without further ado, beautiful people, I'm gonna hand the mic proverbially and literally to Karthik, and I hope you have a really nourishing and generative session. I've got to hop off and get on a train to The Hague, so I have to love you and leave you all.
Safe travels, and thank you for such a beautiful introduction, Aditi.
No, of course, thank you for being you. What can I say?
Right. So yeah, well, safe travels. I'm gonna kick things off now because I'm wary of time, and I just want to make sure that we have time at the end for Q&As. As Aditi said, that we'll be looking at navigating the music industry from a sort of holistic perspective. So I'm going to go through like lots of different topics and talk about things from various different angles, but at the end I'm going to kind of round things off. So if you guys have questions, feel free to write them down. I'm going to share my screen with you so that you guys can see the slides, and I'm also going to make the slides available so that you can download them afterwards. If I am speaking too fast, so I'm just sharing my screen. If I'm speaking too fast, just let me just give me a shout, because I'm gonna try and I'm trying to rattle through this. So we've had our introduction, a little bit about me. I've worked in the music industry for around 13 years. I've held over that period of time, I've held many roles. I've been a touring musician for the longest time, an artist, songwriter, producer, DJ. I've programmed events, that was like a big part of my career in music, and been a promoter, been a tour manager for many years, and I've taken roles on in mentoring. So I feel like with that experience in mind, I've seen lots of different angles of the music industry, and I've seen lots of people trying to find themselves in the music industry, and seen basically how confusing it can be, and how overwhelming it can be, because I think the issue that plagues most people is that trying to engage with the music industry feels, like Aditi said, very incongruous to who we are as artists. It feels like sometimes it's something very, very separate from what we do, being an artist, being creative, having a political motive, having meaning behind your work. and then having to engage with an industry that essentially is like every other industry. They're trying to the music industry is there to generate income, right? Is there to create money for people. So from the beginning, what does it mean to be an artist in the music industry today? So today, and I say today specifically because the music industry is always changing, and nowadays it means obviously on a fundamental, what will never change is that it means being you on a base level. Whatever you do, write, produce, DJ, play, perform, make your art, that is the oops, sorry, I just need to let someone in. That is the bottom line of what you are as an artist. It means you have the skills to write music, create, and hone your skills as an artist. And I think what people most typically believe is that that is where it stops, that you're an artist and that's it. But actually being an artist in the music industry and being an artist, a careered artist, means that you have to be flexible, and you have to be able to build your skills in loads of different directions as well. It doesn't mean being a jack of all trades, but it does mean that you have to understand that in this day and age, there's a lot more expected of you as an artist. It means you have to be able to get up and tour and play gigs if that is part of your practice, that you work in promotions, that you have an understanding of how to promote yourself, navigate social media whilst maintaining your authenticity. It means that you work in design and branding, essentially, because you need to understand how to present yourself and your art to the world, and moreover, how to make it digestible and understandable to people, how to get your message across. It's not just saying something, but it's understanding how people are going to receive that. Means you have management skills, bringing people in to work with, having teams. And as we get further into this talk, we'll be talking about bringing in teams and working with people in the music industry. So this means that from go, you kind of have to have good management skills. Also means you have an ear to the ground, paying attention to what's happening in the industry, knowing how it works, understanding how the music industry works. I'm not going to lie, is incredibly boring, but it is very, 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 very useful. There's loads of team members who I've had, who I've worked closely with and who I've had conversations with who've said that it baffles them how many people don't bother getting around to learning. But essentially, if you're trying to have a career in music, it's going to benefit you so much understanding how the industry works, because it will also then mean that you understand how the industry changes. And we're living in an era where so much is changing. Things are changing all the time with technology and with the industry. And right now, the industry is going through quite a tricky period of time. So if you could take time to learn stuff and equip yourself, arm yourself with the knowledge of how the music industry works, which obviously is why you guys are here as well, it is good. And ultimately, all of this means that in some way you're trying to make a career out of your art. You're not just making your art for pleasure, which is also totally valuable and very, very important. But being an artist in the music industry means that you are trying to, in some way, have a career. So why do we have to do all these things? I just rattled off a list of like a million things that we have to do, which obviously feels quite overwhelming. But in this day and age, knowledge and skills are easily attainable. So the expectation is higher on creatives to be self-sufficient. This is obviously a blessing and a curse. You know, it means that we're expected to do more. As well as this, there is much, much less money in the industry. Back in the 90s and early noughties, record labels wielded a lot more power than they do now, which meant that they had a lot more money. There was a lot more money flying around the music industry. Right now, there isn't that as much, which is actually, I'll get onto this specific topic later, but that's not a bad thing. It means that there's more control in your hands as artists. So the silver lining to this is that it means that you can be self-sufficient. You don't need to rely on anyone else. So you don't need to expect a label to give you big bucks to do what you need to do. It means that you have the capacity to do that. You have power and you have access to knowledge. You know, with the internet, we're very lucky to have that. There is a lot of misinformation out there, don't get me wrong, but with the right sort of direction and guidance, you can definitely equip yourself and arm yourself with a lot of knowledge. And Also, it means that you, as an artist in the industry, that once you are self-sufficient, all of these aspects of promotion, artwork, press, radio, and team skills, they all become assets of yours. This all becomes part of your practice. I think people find this particular idea very difficult to understand, that you as an artist, it's not that your art is here and that all of the rest of these things are here. Like that's extra. That stuff isn't extra. That stuff is very, very much part of your practice. That is fundamentally, if you're an artist in the music industry, you have to know how to do all of these things. And actually engaging with all of these things will offer you a number of benefits, which I will get into. And most importantly, understanding that these things are part of your practice means that you have control over all of them, that you're not giving control away to other people, because when you rely on other people, you give your control away, which also means that you're compromising part of your artistic identity, your integrity at times, and who you are. So that's not something that you want to be doing, obviously. So the main roles that we discussed of this are being an artist, creating your art, doing whatever it is that you do as part of your creative practice. I'm separating these topics outside creative practice, although I have said that this is all part and parcel of the same thing. There's promotion and marketing and branding, management skills, and long-term vision and strategy. We're going to go through all of these topics. Again, like I said, feel free to take notes. You can screenshot stuff if you want to come back to it later when we do a Q&A at the end. But I'm going to make these slides available to you later as well. So I apologize for being, if this is coming across as being patronizing or simplistic, but I want to discuss each part of this in a very, very straightforward way, so that we're looking at everything together in a very holistic way. So what does it mean to be an artist today? Being an artist means you're dedicated to creating meaningful, long-lasting work. And this is a key point: meaningful, long-lasting work. We live in the age of social media, which puts pressure on us that is impossible to keep up with. So there's just like, a barrage of information all the time. We're always seeing people doing things. We're always seeing people posting things. And often it feels like it's our responsibility to keep up with it. How are we going to be noticed or heard or get our message across if we don't keep up? But actually, this isn't feasible, and it's not practical. So my radio plugger told me recently that Steve Lamacq from BBC Six Music, one of the main presenters, he has 600 tracks a week on his maybe list to be played at radio. That's on his maybe list. That's not on his definitely playing list. That's still 600 tracks from 600 different artists that he likes. That's not even guaranteed. There's over 100,000 tracks going up a month at DSP, like Spotify, Deezer, whatever. That's a lot of music. So what does that mean? That doesn't mean we should be discouraged. It means that more than ever, we need to make music that's important to us, because if you try to keep up with how fast things move, or if you try to make music to get noticed, you'll realize that that's impossible. Being authentic is absolutely the key. It's the cornerstone here of what we're doing. And I'm sure so much of what you guys have looked at on this project, on this course. It means being committed to your work and being able to stand behind it, so that even if something doesn't get traction when it first comes out, you're proud of it and not ashamed that you put something shit out just for the sake of keeping up with the industry. And this happens a lot. This really, really grinds people down, because you think like, oh man, there's so much stuff out there. I need to keep up. I need to put stuff out. And actually you just end up putting out subpar stuff. And this isn't subpar in anyone's opinion other than your own, because ultimately your art has to be meaningful, and it's only the most meaningful when you're creating something that you care about. So these moments and fads will fade, but your music will last forever. Sure enough, as Facebook has been, surpassed by Insta, and Insta's been surpassed by TikTok, in 5 to 10 years, when you guys are still making music, there's going to be something else, but your music will still be there. So at the end of the day, the most important thing is to create really important and meaningful music with a message, or even if the message isn't clear to you, make sure the music is authentic. Allow yourself to be experimental, allow yourself to grow and change, and don't try and keep up with how fast things move. You know, like there's a million artists doing a million things. Everyone just needs to take time to do what's important to them. That is really the best piece of advice that I could offer, because I've seen in the last 13 years so many careers be made and fall. I've seen people have extremely high levels of success and then disappear. And this, you know, taking this advice on board is really just safeguarding yourself against how tricky the industry can be. So we're going to move on from that. I guess we have you know, a clear idea of what it means to be an artist. It's really just about maintaining your integrity and authenticity. We're going to look at promotion, marketing, and branding, which is also can be quite a tricky topic to cover. And this is quite a hefty one, so I'm gonna take a little bit of time to go through it. So promotion, marketing, and branding, often by creatives, is just like the thing that makes you feel like you don't want to do music, or like makes you feel sick. It's often perceived as, how do I get people to talk about me? How do I build buzz? How do I get people to follow me on socials? People who are, you know, heads, or like, you know, think they're a bit above it, are like, oh man, I don't engage with that stuff. It's not for me. It's not important. I don't want to do that. But actually, it is important, and you're not above it. If you want to work in the music industry, if you want to operate in the music industry, you have to do it. This way of perceiving it, how do I get people to talk about me? How do I build buzz? This is transient, and these results won't last long for you. But when you look at it the way that I was mentioning earlier, as part of your creative practice, promotion, marketing, and branding, we look at it as a different way. We look at it in a different light, actually. So we can look at promotion, marketing, and branding as, what are my goals as an artist? What do I love doing? What can I share with the world that is new and exciting? You're not thinking about how to promote yourself. You're not thinking, how do I get people to notice me? You're thinking of this in a very different way, from a different angle. What is it that I love doing? What is it, you know, even if you're wanting to do stuff on social media or use public facing platforms, what do you enjoy doing? Where does your voice feel like it has the most you know, it has the most power, in a way? And what makes you feel empowered? Is it performing live? Is it doing stuff? Is it making reels? Is it making music video? You think about it in a way that is meaningful to you, rather than thinking about what, you know, will people like my stuff? Am I going to get traction? You think about it in the sense of, how does this make people feel? So if you're thinking about, you know, on a very practical level, a social media post or an interview, this is the way that I often look at interviews now. I think about how my words are going to make people feel. I don't think about, you know, what's going to make me sound cool, or, you know, like, what does the journalist want to hear? You have to think really about how your words are making people feel, in the same way that you think about your music. How does the world perceive me and my art? So if you're even, again, we're going to run with this analogy of social media. If you were to look at your page, what do people think about you? Do they think, oh wow, this person's so cool? Or do they think, wow, this person does some really interesting stuff, I'd be really interested to follow them, you know? Or what is the context that I'm showing myself in, and how would I want to be pictured? Time and time again, I see people just kind of jumping on this thing of having, like, you know, either very steezy press shots where they look cool, but it doesn't really mean anything to me. You know, I'm looking at that and trying to understand, what are they trying to say? Or taking a press shot outside a pub or something random. Like, as an artist, you need to have an idea of how you want yourself to be pictured. What do people pick up on? I'll give you guys an example of that. On my last campaign, I had this one red corduroy suit that I wore in a shoot. And journalists are lazy. People are lazy. And basically in every interview I did on radio, in press, in something, everyone mentioned this red suit. I mean, it's a good suit, fine. But like, you need to understand that things move fast, like I've said, in social media and in this digital age. So people are going to pick up on things, and you need to be prepared for people to just pick up on something that they've seen. So if it's a photo or an outfit or something, how you've presented yourself, you need to be well considered and think about that. It's just giving yourself time to think about this stuff. So and like I said about the journalist, what would people ask me based on the way that I've presented myself, and what would I want to talk about if I was given a platform? So now I just think very clearly about what my social profile looks like, what my press release or my press pack looks like before it goes out, because I know that if I say anything that isn't like that I can't stand behind long term and someone picks up on that, I'm gonna have to talk about that. I've had 18-month, 2-year long album campaigns where journalists have asked about stuff that I really don't want to talk about, just because things were done in the moment. It's really just about thinking about this as part of your creative practice, not cool, people want to write about me, let's sorry, just admitting someone else here, let's just bosh something out. So lastly, we can look at this also in terms of artists that you love and respect and look up to. Whose work do you see yours alongside? You can put that in press releases. You can also think about yourself on social media, on Spotify, at DSP. Whose playlists do you see yourself alongside? Where do you see your music? What's their message and what is your message? What are the social implications of what you're doing and saying? If we go back to the previous slide, that is completely different from how do I get people to talk about me? How do I build buzz? How do I get people to follow me? But it's essentially the same thing. We're looking at this same topic in two very different ways. So this way that I'm talking about, in my opinion, is a more holistic way to look at yourself as an artist and long-term make an impact and make meaningful art, because we need to look at ourselves as artists as having a long-term career, not as short-term. This whole sort of get big on social media, have things go viral, millions of plays, these are transient and they only last very short-term. What I'm here to say is that if you want to have a long-term career in the music industry, you have to look at things in this way that will benefit you long-term, thinking about things in 3, 5, 7, 10 years. Would you be able to stand behind what you're doing now, or would you be embarrassed? And I think if you follow that first thing of how do you get people to follow you and all that stuff, I think in 3 to 5 years, I personally would feel a little bit embarrassed of that specific way of operating. Looking at the promotion, marketing and branding side of things in this way also will allow you to make a lot more meaningful connections with people, which has been a very, very, very big part of my career, and something Aditi touched on at the beginning as well. We're gonna delve more into this in terms of making connections and building community later, but just a sort of brief on this for now is that when you have a more meaningful, considered approach to what you do as artists, people want to work with you more. Even if you are working with photographers, if you are working with artists, if you're working with people, if you know what you want and if you know how things should be represented, people will respect you, and people find that very exciting to work with. Actually, that's like having creative control. People want to collaborate. People don't just want you to go like, wow, you're a cool photographer, a cool artist, make me a piece of work. Some people do that, but it's very different. And that is also the difference between building community and working with people in the industry in a different way, which again, we're going to talk about later. When we ask ourselves the right questions, we start to create more meaningful work. So what I'm kind of trying to sum up here is that this kind of side of the industry, looking at the music industry, we just need to ask ourselves the right questions and not be scared by things and not think like that you're above it. The music industry moves fast, social media moves even faster, and we obviously don't have the capacity to keep up with it. People will forget things as quickly as they see them. The things that people will always remember are things that are meaningful, and often things that are meaningful don't pick up in the moment, but they will pick up traction later. I also have experience in this of putting out records that almost 18 months later, 2 years later, ended up becoming very successful, and this can happen. So it's about not being discouraged and making sure that you can stay authentic and stand behind your work. So moving on to management skills. I hope I'm not moving too fast. I'm just trying to keep up with my timesheet here. With management skills, this is also something that we could look at in terms of having a team, like managing a team. We're going to look at that as well in more detail afterwards. But in terms of management skills, with regards to communication, you're going to need the ability to express yourself to people that you work with. So this can include booking agents, management, musicians, tour managers, promoters. The list goes on. There's a lot of people. Then there's people that you collaborate with. And yeah, you need to be able to explain to them what you're doing, discuss, and also more importantly, explain why. This is a very, very key part of this. Again, going back to the promotions thing, if you have a clear artistic vision and you know where you stand and why you're doing certain things, you can communicate these things very well, because the more people you work with, and this is the thing, a lot of people come into the industry thinking they want a team, they want all these people behind them, but the more people you have behind you, the more opinions you're going to have to deal with. And often, more often than not, these are very strong opinions. So you're going to be challenged often, and you need to be able to explain why you want things a certain way. You should be able to ask yourself that question: why is it that you want things a certain way? Rather than telling people what you want, you need to know how to explain why you want it. So if you are being asked, if you're presenting yourself to promoters or management, you need to, or even people that you're collaborating with, like bringing session musicians into studio, you need to be able to discuss how and why you want things played in a certain way, not just go ahead and play that, or where and why you want to be playing and touring in certain places. Why is it that you feel like the Netherlands is a really important place? Why is it that you feel like this specific festival is really important for you to play, not just because it's a cool place to play? If you say this, if you can explain this to your booking agent, it's going to be a very, very different conversation than saying like, oh, why have I not got booked for this thing? Or this is something that happens as you move up, why you might not want to work with certain brands. You'll be approached by people potentially to do, ad campaigns or branding. You might have a very particular reason why you don't want to, or you might know in your gut that it's not right for you, but you're not sure why. You should be ready to ask yourself those questions. I know people who've been approached by very big alcohol companies and offered very, very, very substantial amounts of money to do, very small ad campaigns, and that goes totally against their morals, and they know that, and they know why. So they're able to say no, and they're able to make decisions that long term don't destroy their career or don't make them wish that they hadn't done those things or started in the first place. And lastly, another very good why is, why do you want to work with certain producers? Having this why question answered will open up a lot of doors for you. If you just say like, yeah, I really want to work with this Grammy-winning producer because they're amazing, they're so great and they're cool, that's, that is one thing. But if you have a very particular reason why they've made music that's very, very meaningful and important to you, they've done specific things production wise that have left a lasting impact on you, that's why. And that will actually open doors to producers who might have seemed completely out of your reach to start with. Asking yourself that question why will be a game changer. So it's something you should be doing, is constantly just being ready to reflect on your practice as an artist. And that does come back to the creative practice as well. So continuing on management skills, we've discussed working with people. It's very much about asking yourself why and knowing how to communicate. So once you've answered this why question, you need to know how to communicate clearly, and you will be in a much stronger position then. And working in the music industry often is about being in a stronger position and knowing that your art and yourself as an artist isn't going to be compromised. So in another sort of follow-on from that, in terms of management skills, is time. And this is another very, very, very big one. I know that, like, obviously, like I said, I've worked in so many different areas of the music industry, and I've worked with a lot of different people, and the people that I still work with after maybe more than 10 years now are the people who have these skills here on this screen. You know, these skills are key. If you don't have these skills, people will not work with you. I pretty much, I don't do this consciously, but I pretty much operate on a one strike policy. If people are disorganized, if they're late, if they mess up the schedule, if they don't communicate clearly, I don't want to work with them. It's just not a good look. It's not a good look for you. It's not a good look for them, and it basically shows that they don't respect themselves as creatives, and they don't respect you as a creative. And as a creative, you need to understand that organizational skills are also at the very, very bottom of this. Being an artist means being experimental and being creative and being wild and being radical and trying new things, but also being organized is so key to this. You know, you actually have to, like, creating bodies of work, knowing how your year is going to be scheduled. I have my year scheduled pretty much a whole year in advance, if not more than that. Actually, I've been planning next year since early this year. It's just a key part of what I do. It would be impossible for me to do what I do without being highly organized. So timekeeping, prioritization, scheduling, getting good at using tools like Gmail, Calendar, Google Drive, Dropbox. This stuff will really benefit you when you're working with other people as well. And as well as having stems, say like you put a track out and then in a year it gets a sync, you don't have those stems anymore. What happens? You lose that sync, and you lose maybe the opportunity to make 15 grand. That's like, just because you weren't organized. These things will happen as you move forward in the music industry, and maybe in a year or 2 years, or however quickly your career moves, you'll find yourself moving up. The trajectory will change, and you'll wish that you were organized from the beginning. It doesn't mean don't be creative. It doesn't mean don't be radical and don't be wild. It means just be very, very organized with what you do. Know that you have your time set out. This time is for me to be creative. I'm going to still make sure that I'm documenting stuff, I'm being organized with it, and also I'm not fucking people around when I'm working with them, and that I'm being really clear and really, really direct with how I communicate with people. That will honestly be a career game changer for you. It took me a while to learn this. I always had good communication, but like my prioritization and my timekeeping and organization skills have only improved in the last few years. And honestly, it's been a game changer. So that is essentially the three main topics of the main roles of being of what it means to be an artist, and the roles that are expected of you. We're going to touch on long-term vision and strategy. We're going to move towards that. But right now we're going to talk about a big one, which is money, basically. We're going to move towards strategy in everything we're talking about now. But this is quite a big one, because I think a huge part of what puts people off about being in the music industry is that being an artist costs a lot of money. You guys have obviously had a big insight into this on the course. You've been very fortunate to have a lot of stuff provided for you in terms of studio time. But let's look at the basic aspects of what costs us money. From go, you have to buy instruments, laptop equipment. That's the sort of the building blocks. That's the starting point. Studio time, production, touring is extremely, extremely expensive. It costs so much money that I think like more artists that lose money on tour than make money on tour. You can make money on tour selling merch and stuff, but touring costs a lot of money. Making art for your records, press shots, design, music marketing, radio plugging, these things cost thousands of pounds. It costs a lot of money. Production and distribution, merchandise. It's just knowing that these are the costs that you're going to have to encounter, and how you're going to get yourself into a position where you can afford to pay for them. This is the big sort of question, isn't it? So how do we navigate the financial pressures of the music industry? How is it possible to survive as an artist and pay for all of these things? So we're going to look at this in a two-pronged way: career, which is having a career in the music industry, and two, which is a very important topic, which I was touching on earlier, which is community. So as we mentioned earlier, to be an artist, you have to be highly skilled at many things. In order to have a career in the music industry, you have to be highly skilled at many things. Like we said, marketing, promotions, production, songwriting. The bar is high. You have to be able to do many things. It doesn't mean you have to be the best at everything. It just means that you have to be well-rounded. An important aspect of this to understand is that with these skills, you are very useful. You're very talented. I'm not saying like, oh, you have to do all of these things and you have to be the best and it's, you know, you have to compete with everyone. But actually with all of those skills, you become a very, very useful person. And everyone in the music industry is in the same boat. Everyone needs help. Everyone needs support. What you can then consider is, what aspect of these things that I have to do as an artist am I really good at? What do I really enjoy doing? Maybe you really enjoy social media. Maybe you really enjoy production. Maybe you really, really enjoy just being on the road and driving and touring. Or maybe you are actually incredibly organized and you'd be an amazing tour manager. You then take one of these things that you really enjoy doing, and then become very, very, very good at that thing. That will benefit you in your own career, and also means that you will be able to stay working in the music industry and keep learning. As the music industry changes, you can work with it and you can continue being an artist. That is still part of your practice. I'm not trying to be discouraging here. I'm just trying to be realistic in that it's very unlikely that you're going to just hit the ground and be able to generate income as an artist straight up. The most sensible thing to do, looking long term at your career, is to build your skills within that industry. So that is why I think picking maybe one or two or however many things that you really love doing and just sticking to them and working at them, that essentially means that you have a long-term career in the industry and you're continuing to build your skills, which also will build towards the why. You then start to understand all of the, different areas of the industry, and you can explain why you actually want to be presented in a certain way, why you want to be written about in a certain way, why it is that you want to tour in a certain way. Maybe you only want to play a few shows a year, maybe you only want to play really big shows. But if you decide to focus and hone yourself in on a certain thing that you can then use as a skill set and create a job for yourself in the industry, you will also have that. That is a very, very useful thing to do. And going back to the very beginning, I said that I've worked as a tour manager, event programmer, promoter, many things, producer, and I've done those as jobs. That doesn't necessarily mean that I still do those things, but it means that I understand the industry and I can totally understand all the changes that are happening and why. I don't look back on that and think, oh, I wish I just spent all my time songwriting, because then I'd be like in the charts or something. That's not where I see myself as an artist. That may be where you see yourself, and that can be the trajectory that you want to take, but it's just weighing that up. So this side of it, and feel free to write down any questions you have at the end. I just want to make it clear that this doesn't mean that you're giving up. It means that you're finding ways to continue learning about the music industry, and people can pay you to do what you do. So this also can mean you're very, very good at playing guitar or singing or whatever. You get to do that for other people. You get to be session artist. You get to do whatever. That will also mean that you're still developing yourself as an artist, or developing your creative practice in a holistic way. So it's not, in my opinion, at all giving up. I think it just means that you're taking a much more practical approach, and you're still focusing. Your goal is still that you are an artist. This is part of the path that you're taking. So that is the career side of things. The second, and I'd argue equally important thing, is community. Sorry, I just need to have a drink. Looking at the list of costs, again, a very, very important part of this is community. So within every single point of this list is a whole community. I've copied the list back here again: buying instruments, laptop, and equipment. This maybe, if you're lucky from a young age, you may have had your family or friends or people support you, buy these for you, or equipment, who bought you your first instruments, who helps you grow as an artist. That's your community. Studio time, production, touring, art design, marketing, production, all of this stuff. All of these are people who love and believe in you and your music, people who resonate with you as friends and peers, people who you want to work with. This is your community. So this, I'm talking about this specifically in relation to how do we survive as artists? How do we make it work financially? How do we build a community? How does community help us? Engaging with community and reaching out to people whose work you love and believe in, collaborating with them. This is community building. The importance of community is that if everyone has skills that they are willing to share with you, if people want to work with you, this means that people will work with you because they love what you do and because they gel with you and because they resonate with you, not because they work in the music industry and you guys are gonna do some mad power up, or that they're going to make big bucks off you. This is community building. This is reaching out to people and creating long-lasting, meaningful connections. And for me, this has been a huge one. Like most of the working relationships I have come out of community, and some of the most successful things that I've produced or put out, or things that I'm most proud of, those have come more from community than they have from having a big lawyer or having management or having an agent or any of that stuff. This community stuff is, again, it's another one of the cornerstones. It's so important. And thinking about how do I make it work as an artist, we think about how do I engage with my community? You then start to find people who you want to work with. So this takes time, but this is how you can afford to be a musician. If everyone went ahead and did that first point that I made and got a job doing what they enjoy doing as a skill, and everyone had a skill, surely everyone that you surround yourself with would have a skill that they're able to share with you. And if they're part of your community and your goals are aligned, then helping each other is obviously what you're going to do. I know this sounds very sort of like altruistic and out there, but this is what happens. Like, you're working with people in the music industry, and if you gel with people on a level, they're going to want to work with you. And if you have a skill and they have a skill, even if it's not necessarily music or whatever it is, you will work together. That is community building. Honestly, there's plenty of people around who will support you if you're looking in the right places. And I don't think you necessarily need to look at it in terms of skill swapping or skill sharing. I'm just using this quite bluntly to explain how you'd make it work in the music industry. But actually, this community building is much more meaningful than just that. From a financial perspective, it will help you grow yourself as an artist. But looking at it in terms of where people's careers go, sure enough, as you have big plans for yourself, so do other creatives. So if you help people out, those people might go on to work at major radio stations, press publications, production studios, film studios. This actually has been almost entirely how all the collaborations I've been a part of have come together. And I've never been in a position where I've thought like, oh yeah, that person's going to be someone in 5 years. I'm gonna collaborate with them. To be honest, they come out of nowhere, but they're because I've created meaningful connections with people, and those are the things that last more than reaching out to people and cold calling and stuff like that. So collaboration and community is key, but don't forget that it's important to know your creative vision and still keep hold of your creative baby so that it stays authentic to you. As I said in that very first point, maintaining creative control is key. It's not about being really controlling, but it's just about maintaining your vision, because you'll get pulled in different directions. Knowing the answers to those questions is still important. Knowing the why is very important, especially when you're working with other people who have their own creative visions. Again, going back to what I said earlier, The more people you work with, the more opinions you're going to have. The more creatives you work with, the more creative opinions you're going to have. So it's just important to know where you stand and important to have your vision. Again, that doesn't mean don't be experimental, don't be radical, don't do crazy shit. Like, do you. Just know that you're on your trajectory and know why you're doing what you're doing. And community building will just happen within that. You'll grow your roots and people will be there. Just keep an eye out and try to find people that you'd like to work with as well. So moving on from community, we're going to discuss building a team. So once we've got, well, actually, before we move on to building a team, the sort of crux of this community building, before we talk about team building, is that you build yourself into a very, very strong position, which we're going to discuss more in a few slides' time in the music industry. Once you have a community, you've grown your roots, you have a much more solid position, you've developed a load of assets, you have a clear artistic identity, and you have a community around you that support you. Before you build a team, you need a community. This is a very, very, very big topic because I think a lot of people hit the music industry and think, yo, how am I going to get an agent? How am I going to get booked? How am I going to get out there? How am I going to get all these things? And actually, you will get those much more when you have a community around you, when you've reached out to people to collaborate with, to work with, to perform with, to create visuals with, to photograph with. All of these things will help you get yourself to the next stage, which is having a team. But that isn't actually the be all and end all. The community aspect is actually way more fundamental and way more important than that, because community will support you and community will be there much longer than necessarily people in your team will be there. So when building your team, you ask yourself, how do we build a team? Why do we build a team? When do we build a team? I'm finding it impossible to build a team. We're going to discuss all of these in the following slides. But I think an important thing to understand is that the music industry is, as I said earlier, in a tricky phase of its lifespan. It's difficult, building a team means that you want people who support you, or you've got to the place that you are ready to take things to the next level. Right now, it is actually trickier than ever to have an agent. Ticket sales are on an all-time low. Record sales are low. There's an economic crisis going on. I'm not here to bum you guys out and say that it's difficult. I'm just here to say, going back to the last slide, more than ever, this community aspect is so big. I know DJs and artists, other people, peers in my community, who get booked way, way, way more than people who have booking agents and management and any of these things. People who have the whole shebang are getting less than people who have a much stronger community engagement. People who are embedded in what they do and they care and they reach out to their communities. This is actually, this right now in this point in the music industry, this community aspect is the most important thing. And I'm not entirely sure how long this tricky phase of the music industry is going to last for, but it's going to take a little while for it to come out of this phase. So before you start thinking about getting an agent and management and all this stuff, think about community and think about what that means to you. I think, in my opinion, I think this is a much more useful and helpful way to think about building your career forward. So going back to building a team, how do we build a team? We do this in much the same way that we would build a community. We reach out to people, we go to events, we perform, we stay active in our craft and industry. We see who is working with the people that we look up to, that we are aligned with, and we find ways to make connections with them. This doesn't mean cold calling, emailing, trying to connect with agents and managements with huge rosters that would surely exponentially blow up your career. 9.5 times out of 10, that will not work. And 9.9 times out of 10, if you reach out to a big management company or an agent and you're the small fry on their roster, you're not going to get any love or any attention. I've seen this happen time and time and time again. Jumping on, like, I'm not going to name any names, but jumping on any of these very big booking agents or management or labels, it's not the way to do it as a small artist. People think that this is the magic cure, but I have close friends who have had all of these things and they're desperate to get out of that situation. Again, going back to the community thing, you build yourself in a way that your career has roots before you get to this stage. And when you actually do get to this stage, you are able to build a team that resonates with you. So if you've worked with artists who are then on a label, or you've collaborated with someone, these team relationships will come about much more organically if you've done it through building yourself with community and building yourself organically as an artist. Going out and hollering at loads of agents and all this stuff, it's not going to work. Very, very often it's not going to work. So I think there's a much more organic approach is to just go to shows, see who's booking shows, like meet people, chat to people. You might end up meeting someone who just seems very switched on, very engaged, that they resonate with you and you resonate with them on a level. You don't think, how are they going to take my career to the next level? You actually want to work with these people. Having a working relationship with someone is like having a relationship with someone. Working in the music industry, you're connected to these people like at the hip, touring with people. You spend more time in a van with your band and artists than you do with your family. I saw my bandmates more than I saw my partner for probably 2 years. So you have to understand that you want to work with these people. So you need to think about how you'd want to meet those people. Again, it's asking yourself how and why. So yeah, there's plenty of independent management companies and booking agents who are working with independent artists. It's not necessarily about jumping on the big hype, the big labels, the big thing. They look good and they have money, but long term, it doesn't necessarily provide you with what you need. And it's a very hard thing to understand. The allure of a big company and label is great. At every stage of your career, you'll be asking yourself the question, would it be better for me to do that? And actually, the answer is almost definitely it's not, usually. And talking about making meaningful connections, as sure as it is that you are a young emerging artist, there are also young emerging music industry heads with new visions for the future. I've said the music industry is going through a tricky period, but there's people like you guys as young emerging artists who are moving into the industry and they're changing stuff up. These are the people who are on the level with you. It's not about reaching out to, the old cis white men who run the music industry and trying to appeal to them, or trying to appeal to someone who's going to give you a big fat budget for making your record but tell you what to do. It's about making connections with people like young A&Rs who actually go to the shows at these small venues and who are engaging with their communities. These are the people who you're going to make more connections with. So again, team building is about making connections with the right people. It's about creating community, but into a more professional context. So why do we build a team? We build a team so that we can continue growing our business as a musical artist. We build a team when we're ready to use more of a support network to develop what we're doing. So using the analogy of funding or a loan for a business, you wouldn't take out a massive loan or ask for funding before your business has legs. That would be suicide. You definitely should not do this with your creative practice. If you're young, if you're like just starting out, maybe you have a very clear vision. I'm not saying that this is, this is like this is an absolute rule. But if you have room to grow yourself in your business and grow your roots, because now we're talking about team building, we're looking at our artistic practice as a business. You wouldn't take out a massive loan if your business didn't have legs. That is actually crazy. You need to be honest with yourself about this, and when you're ready, this will start to happen. And if it's not happening, you'll be in a position to make it work. If it feels like you're clutching at straws, most likely it means that you have some personal growth to do. This more creative things you can do, you know, with the industry being as tough as it is, it means that there's way more capacity to do radical things and be different and try out new things rather than appealing to what actually isn't working anymore. You know, following very traditional methods of doing things with teams and how you'd be expected to release music or tour. This is changing, and it's actually for you guys to just try out new things. So don't think that you are not going to be able to make it without a team. That is definitely not how it works. A team helps, but you get a team at the point that you're ready really to take the business to the next level. So going back to what I was just talking about, when do we build a team? It's when you are ready to take the next step into turning into a business, and this needs to be understood. So is what you're selling clear? Is your artistic vision clear? Are you really ready to get to the next step? Or do you deep down feel like you'd like more time to experiment and play? Because once you're in the limelight and once you're putting music out there in a sort of prolific way, or in you know, in the public eye, that your capacity to play becomes reduced to a degree. If there's more that you can do on your own, you definitely should. Don't be put off by this. I'm not saying that once you've got all of these things, you won't still be able to play. I'm just saying that if there's much more capacity to grow as an artist, give yourself the time to do that, because that period of time is gold dust. When you get busy and you're touring, you're not going to have time to do all that stuff. If you're on the road all the time, you're not going to have time to be in the studio and play and just experiment. You know, actually, you want to make the most of this time, that you know, make the most that you can of this time. And I think, yeah, this is a key part of understanding this. If you have a clear artistic vision, what you're selling is clear, then that's great. And the reason I use the word selling is because we're talking now specifically, again, about team building and about the music industry. So your music is being sold and a team is being built around you to generate income. If you have 5 people, that's 5 people who are expecting to make money off you. And you also should be hoping to make money in some capacity. So to just follow on from that, if you're finding it impossible to build a team, again, just keep going and keep doing what you can, keep experimenting. Like I said, that use this time, it's just as valuable having this time to experiment. It means that you'll have time to grow. Looking at yourself as an artist long term will definitely help you in when you start having a team around you. Your vision will be very, very clear. It was probably 6 years, was it 6 years? Wait, maybe, yeah, it's about 6 years of me touring internationally. Maybe 5 or 6 years of me touring internationally before I had you know, management, label, lawyer, all of this stuff. And even still, like, by that point, what we were doing was very clear, but there was still room for us to grow. We weren't desperate for that thing, but it came along at a much later stage than people realize. And actually, a lot of musical peers that I have also get to that point where they're career musicians. We're talking about being a career musician here, not just making it or like having a TikTok that goes viral. It's about like actually creating a long-term career in music. So a very important part of this is being patient, making connections, but never at the expense of your musical integrity and authenticity. Long term, that's not what you want to do. Things rarely ever work out the way that you expect them to. So sacrificing your integrity for moving forward will rarely give you what you want. If you think like, you're working with so and so is gonna be the thing, it's gonna do me really good. Almost definitely it won't, because that's just not how it works. The way, it's funny, but the music industry is just a bit like life. It works in mysterious ways, and the way that you expect things to go, you put out a record and you think that that's going to be the big campaign. That's not usually how it works. These things move in very different ways, with syncs, with publishing, with collaborations, you don't necessarily know where it's going to come from. So the main point is, don't sacrifice your integrity if you're thinking that working with a certain person, signing to a certain label, doing a certain thing is going to get you there. And this actually leads me on to a brief rant that isn't part of the slideshow, but this is the YouTube thing where you can fall into an absolute wormhole of thinking of all these videos of how do I get signed to this label, and getting signed to a label in 2023, and how to make it in music. And to be honest, all of that stuff is bullshit. That stuff is just created to generate traction and generate streams and views. The way to make it in 2023 is to set yourself up for a long-term career in music, is not to make a viral TikTok. Maybe it'll help, but or to make music that sounds exactly, I've seen this a lot. How do you make music that sounds exactly like so and so? That isn't you. That is making music that sounds like someone else. And actually a label might sign you and they'll pay you as long as that person is cool, the person whose music that you sound like. If you're not being authentic and not being you, you're only leeching your musical industry career off someone else. So that's a very important thing to understand. That was just my little brief tangent from that. If you stay authentic to what you're doing, things will work out eventually, for sure. So the next big topic is leverage. And again, this sounds quite scary. It sounds a bit overwhelming, and it's a bit of a confusing one for people to understand. What does leverage have to do with all of this? Going back to the analogy of taking out a business loan or receiving a grant, when you receive a grant, whoever has funded you expects something back. They don't just give you the money. You have to fill out all these applications, and at the end of it, whoever's giving you the money is going to expect something back, whether it's your success story or whether it's the huge interests that you pay back to a bank off a loan. There is something for the other party to gain. This is the same with the music industry as with any other. I'm not saying like everyone's out to get you and people are always going to expect something in return. But when you get to the stage which we are at now of this talk of building a team and really being operative in the music industry with regards to your career position beyond just community and where you've built yourself, as I'm sure you guys will have communities, it's very important to know and to understand the industry. It's not about necessarily engaging with it or playing the game or playing any games. It's just about understanding it. So leverage, when you work with someone in a non-community based professional environment, you need to think about leverage. What compromises you might have to make in working with them? What assets do they have for you? And then what are they trying to leverage from you? What makes you appealing to them to work with? What assets do you have for them? So we're gonna delve more deeply into what an asset is to you as an artist, or what an asset is for you as an artist. What are you trying to leverage from them? Their assets are money, contacts, industry knowledge. And what are you prepared to exchange for this? What are your assets? So your assets are, there could be an absolute multitude of things here. Like an asset is essentially anything that you create, anything that creates part of your musical or artistic tapestry. It could be anything from music, live show, production skills, image, aesthetic, community, to Spotify playlists or YouTube channel or anything, or street art. I don't know. It could be anything. You could have anything that has some kind of engagement, anything that's got you to the point that you're at in your career when you have a team and when you're operative in the music industry. These become your assets. These are the things that a label or other people who want to work with you in a professional context will want to leverage from you. So, and also going back to what we discussed before, the jobs that you have, like promotion, artwork, streaming, etc., all of these things that you need to get good at, these will also help you create assets. These will help you not just be a one-dimensional artist who makes really good music. It means that you'll understand the industry and you'll build yourself into a really strong position This is what I was saying earlier, we'd come back to. It's talking about our position here in this team sense. You need to know that the foundation that you're standing on is rock solid, and you understand what your assets are, and that you also understand that you can negotiate when you know what your assets are. So if you have, and we'll jump back on that in a minute, but if you have amazing streaming numbers on Spotify, a really amazing artistic vision, highly produced music that you've worked on, or 100,000 Instagram followers, or whatever combination of these things, these are your assets that a label or a partner will be trying to leverage because they think they can make money from you because of them. I'm not saying that they're going to try and squeeze you necessarily, but those are your assets. They're going to try and leverage those in a way. It also on another hand means that they believe in you. They have, they can verify that you have all of these things, and that is case in your favor for them to work with you. But those are also things that you can leverage. I use the word leverage a lot here because it means that when you go into negotiations, my role here is to make sure that if you guys are going into the music industry, you know that you're standing in a strong position and you know what you can leverage. If someone tries to give you a rough deal, or even if they try and give you a good deal, you know where you're standing and you're like, yeah, no, these are my assets and this is my thing. I've built this myself. This is strong. So for example, you sign to a record label, they will typically give you an advance anywhere from a few £1,000s to much more than that. In exchange, they will expect rights to your music, which is one of your assets, from anywhere between 7 and 25 years is typical in any sort of conventional music contracts. This is for C&P, for copyright and publishing. Are you prepared to give that away? If you're confident enough in how strong your assets are, you may be able to negotiate this down. If you're fresh to the industry, or if you've just been signed by a major label, it's highly unlikely that they'll give you the chance to negotiate. They may also ask for a cut of your live fees if your live show is an asset. Maybe they'll ask for control of your press campaign. If your image and look is an asset that they can capitalize on, they might decide what ad campaigns you go into. They might decide a number of things. This could be with a label or management. So it's thinking about your assets and how important they are and how they belong. So those assets belong to you. How you need to make sure that that you're leveraging those to make sure that whatever deals are being done, whatever working relationships you're forming, those work in your favor. Example number 2, you sign to management. They may, in some cases, want to market you in a way that compromises you or capitalizes on part of your identity as a marginalized person as a selling point. Are you prepared to do that in exchange for some potential career success? You might not even realize that they're doing that. But when you realize, when you take a step back and have an aerial view and you realize that part of your identity, because you engage with a wider community, that's an asset, you will realize that that is something that people will try and capitalize on. And I'm not saying by any measure all management companies or labels are like that. I'm just giving you a couple of examples because at this particular point in time, there have been some case studies about this kind of thing happening, where QPOC artists are being put in compromising positions that they have not realized that they're in. So it's just understanding that that's an asset. If you are being offered opportunities to grow your career, you might think this is great, but you just have to think about potentially what you're compromising. And this could also be your community. Your community got you to where you are, so this could be a bad thing to do. This could lose you your career. They've helped you create your assets, so they are your community, but to someone else they're an asset. Just realizing that. But a very, very important point to note here is that this isn't all doom and gloom. I'm just talking about it in the sense that I'm just trying to debunk a lot of these ideas of the sort of like, oh, I want a big label, I want a big manager, I want all this stuff. I'm not saying it's bad at all. There are brilliant managers out there are brilliant labels out there are brilliant booking agents out there. As much as you guys love music, other people love music as well, and people even in those positions do love music. So I'm not saying necessarily people are bad, but it's just being aware that as you move up in the music industry, these questions become more pertinent to ask. So, and looking at people who are, sort of who are resonating with you on a level, these are people who you've built your team with, these are people who you want to work with, people working in the industry that you've built into your team as your people. They may see your assets as something important with a strong message that they can take to a bigger audience. And this becomes the reason that they want to work with you, not because they want to make bucks off you. Of course they want to make bucks off you. That's just how the music industry works. Otherwise, you'd just be doing it for fun. You wouldn't be saying, I want to make it as a musician. But they see your message and they want to work with you. This is a very good thing. And this is the reason we enter into the music industry. This is also why we make compromises and give away our assets in exchange for support, or say like, yeah, take my music and run with that, get me signed to a label, find me an agent, whatever, to your manager, because you trust them. And that is also a reason that your message needs to be strong and your artistic identity needs to be strong. The more you build that, the more you build your community, the more you build yourself into this strong position that I keep mentioning, the more clear your message will be and the more unshakable you'll be. That means at the point that agents and whoever start approaching you, it's going to be very clear who you are. They're not going to be like, yeah, I'm just going to put you on whatever gig, or I'm going to, I'm going to push your career forward. You should know what pushing your career forward would look like to you. That's, the music industry is vast and your career could look like anything, but you should have an idea of what you'd like it to look like long term. That doesn't mean that it has to stay that way and that it won't change. 13 years ago, I don't think my musical professional career would look exactly like it does now. You can totally change, but having a clear vision just means that you're always steering yourself in the right direction. So what does all this mean? The music industry is an industry not dissimilar to any other. You wouldn't go into Sainsbury's and tell the person at the cashier that you're mad hungry, so they should just give you food. You also need to pay for it. You have to understand that when you work with people in the music industry, either directly or indirectly, you will be paying them. Forming a community or building your community musically would be like cooking and sharing your food with people. Industry people at that level of career musician are not sharing your food. They're essentially taking your ingredients, making some side dishes to sell on your behalf, and then asking to be paid for it. I mean, I'm not saying that they're hustling you. I'm saying that this is part of it, and maybe doing that, making the side dishes, is what's going to bring people to your restaurant and going to make people want to engage with what you do and buy your music. Doesn't mean that everyone's out to get you. It just means you need to understand that this is how it works, that when your art moves from being something community focused and just an artistic practice to something industry focused, you know the price that you're paying. When you get to this stage, even working with friends and community will change. You'll have to pay people properly. You'll have to contract deals. You'll have to do something. You have to do things that are all sort of officiated. So that is really that's the crux of it. And I think it's just important for everyone to know that. So I think we're sort of coming to the end of the slideshow, but I think I'd like to round up everything that I've been talking about, taking it back to the beginning, which is that getting to this point requires confidence. If we start from the beginning of the slideshow, we're thinking about our artistic practice in a holistic way. We're thinking about all the things that we need to do, all the things that we need to learn. I know this might all have sounded quite overwhelming, but I'd really like it to sound empowering, because what I'm saying is that actually the power is in your hands. if you build yourself, if you develop your skills, if you create a space for yourself in the music industry with other skills, not just being an artist and not trying to just get yourself signed to labels, you've built yourself into a much more strong and empowered position. If you think that someone else is going to take you to the next level, you will always be in a weak position in the music industry. I know this sounds like I'm talking about it like it's Game of Thrones or something, but really it's thinking about yourself as you move up the industry. It's a career, you're moving in a career progression kind of way. We're talking about the industry. If you start from a very strong position, you will end up in an even stronger position. But if you start from a position where you're a young pup and you're hoping to get signed to X, Y, or Z and work with these very big people, you start off in a very weak position, and the foundations will be built on that. I know many people who've signed to major labels, and they have everything that I would have dreamed of maybe 13 years ago, which is just getting a salary from a label and having tons of money pumped into campaigns, which I'm fortunate to have at this point, but that hasn't come from those aspects. And then after a year, maybe 2 years, they get dropped, and then they disappear from the music industry because they started in a way that was not strong and that was totally reliant on other people who essentially were trying to capitalize on them. If you work your way up and build community, building a team will also happen along the way. Starting with an independent booking agent, starting with smaller management, all of this stuff. As you grow community, these things will happen. People in your community might even want to work with you in that capacity. So it's just working together with people. It's very, very important. You don't know where people's trajectories are going to go and how they'll want to work with you or help you. So I think it's just important to remember that. So building yourself, so getting to this point requires confidence. It just means that you have to stay really true to what you're doing, and building yourself to this point through your connections and community and developing your artistic practice and musical voice is the most important thing to do. So it's really just taking time as well. The other big point here is that I've kind of touched on a lot is social media and how fast things move now. And I'm not saying it's bad. I'm not, it's something that we have to do as part of our career. If you want to engage with it, it's something that we have to do. Oftentimes people don't want to do that kind of thing, but those people have either been doing music from before social media was a thing and they've built themselves into a position where that's not necessary, or they are making money in another way as a producer or as something or whatever, or they don't want to do it, and either they're very lucky and it works out for them, or more often than not it means that they don't have those opportunities. So it's just creating these opportunities for yourself to learn and develop and grow, find authentic ways to do that, and the rest will become clear. And also knowing all your assets as you build them, you just basically have to keep going, and things will become clearer to you as you grow your roots, and don't get caught up in chasing what success looks like to you in social media and on these platforms. I think it's very, very important not to get caught up in chasing what success is presented to you as by social media, but chasing what success means to you as an artist. Whatever that is, it might change, but that's what should be guiding you, not like how well it looks like other people are doing, because that almost always isn't what is happening behind closed doors or what's happening in their working relationships. It's a tricky industry, but for sure, if you stay authentic, everything that you do, you'll be able to stand behind. And if you really give everything a lot of thought as you move forward through the industry, people will really respect you. So that's pretty much the end of my slideshow. I'm going to open it up to Q&A now. I know I'm actually a bit early on this, but yeah, I don't know if you guys are going to have any questions, because I have covered a lot of topics here. If there's anything that you guys would like me to go over again, touch back on any specific topics, because I did move through stuff pretty quickly. if there's any particular slides that you guys would like me to go over, just let me know. I'm going to stop screen sharing and I can jump back on this again if anyone wants to, but if not, I've kind of gone through it. Any questions?
Coming out of hidden,
No questions.
everyone.
Hello, everyone. Seeing lots of waves.
I've got a question, I guess.
Yeah, please go ahead.
I guess it's like your slideshow is amazing. It's really good to know all these things and think about all these things.
Thank you.
Where I guess I do all of these kinds of things, like I take a long time to produce something. Like if I put it out, it has to be like special, like specific. But like these things come with like, you know, like so much time, and also like doing all these different parts. And it's like, say, like producing an album, and then I also like do exhibitions, like make sculptures, all this kind of stuff. And then like some of my friends like see me kind of like doing all of this stuff, getting to a certain point, and then me being kind of like depleted
Yeah,
at the end. And then I'm kind of sad, but like happy with the way things gone and like with the way the work is. I guess it's that point of like, some people are like, oh, you should focus on like one thing like music, but it's like, no, but I like to do sculptures, I like to do music.
yeah.
But like people tell me I'll narrow down and focus on one thing, but that doesn't feel authentic or like true to what I do.
Yeah, sorry. Sorry to cut you off there. Thank you for being so honest. I think that's yeah, I'm really grateful to hear that and for you to be so honest. Thank you. I think that's a really, really great question. I think that people saying focus on one thing implies that if you focus on one thing, you're magically going to make it. And also that making it is the be all and end all. Firstly, making it is luck of the draw. Like having a career in music means that you've in a creative industry means that you've stuck to doing what you've done for long enough that you've established your position there, that you're like, I'm here and this is what I do and this is who I am. Having a hit single will give you a bit of radio play for about 5 minutes, you know, like it's great for sure. It's great. Having the radio play is good. Having all those things are good. I also have friends who've had that, who've been on all the playlists. I've been on the playlist, but I'm here still doing my thing and still grinding in the industry in the same exact way as I was 13 years ago. I'm not grinding any less, actually, because I've now got all of this stuff doesn't mean I'm grinding any less. It means I'm grinding equally hard. And I think if what you're doing, like the exhibitions and the art and the performance is all authentic and important to you, that is like absolutely what you should be doing. Is just knowing that it may take longer than other people by comparison who are just doing music or just touring. You know, using myself as an example, I play drums and I produce and I DJ and I do very like many different things. And I do think sometimes like, oh, if I just stuck to one thing, maybe I would be more successful in my career, but that career success isn't what I want. What I want to do is all of the things that make me happy as a creative. I wouldn't say stick to one thing, because also as a creative, there's so many things out there to offer you funding, like Arts Council or like Somerset House open things up for performance artists. Once you find and create your niche, you're creating your thing. It's our duty as artists to be authentic. You create a space for other people to do what you're doing. You know, you're not just looking at it in terms of yourself, but think about younger yous doing that and being inspired by you. Because once you get to maybe, you know, being depleted is just part of being an artist. I'm afraid that is part and parcel of the game that we're playing as being artists. Being depleted is just the dark side to the sunshine, and we got to have both of them. I'm afraid that no amount of music industry knowledge is going to get rid of that depletion. That is just part of the artistic struggle, and that's, you know, in a way we probably do it partially because that gives us some sense of humanity, right? But think about it in this way. I have people reaching out to me and saying, like, even when I feel depleted, people being like, what you're doing is really meaningful to me. And I've just come out of it, like, you know, not right now, but I may have come out of a point of depletion and being like, oh man, I'm really ground down from it. I need to step back from stuff. But what you're doing is impacting other people. You're making public facing work. So what you're doing isn't just for you, you're expressing yourself, but you're also sharing that art with people, and you're also putting yourself out there to potentially inspire other people. Think about it in that way. People, if you were you 5 years ago and you saw you'd probably be mad inspired. You wouldn't say, oh, he should probably be doing one thing. You'd be like, that is very sick. I'm very inspired by that, and no doubt there are definitely people doing that. Just think about people like you. Those are the people who are going to be in your community.
Yeah, for
If
sure.
that answers your question. Sorry if I've gone a bit tangential. But you asked a very simple question, which is, do I think you should be focusing on one thing? I think the answer is no. I don't think you should be focusing on one thing. I think you should definitely stay authentic and do all of the stuff, and don't worry about being depleted. It's just look after yourself in between.
Oh, thanks so much.
Yeah, pleasure. Anyone else? Any other questions?
I actually have a question touching upon that last point of depletion.
Yes.
I've also like been going through like periods of like depletion and like just feeling like I've been doing too much and like just having all of the artistic energy like taken out from me. I find that like sometimes like these periods of depletion can sometimes, as you said earlier on, like the music industry is very much about like being ready to like commit work, turn up on time and stuff.
Yeah.
And sometimes in these periods of depletion, it's very difficult to turn up and be consistent.
Yeah.
Like, I was wondering if you had any advice to help with like managing that.
Yeah, definitely. That's also a really, really good question. And that's one that's not talked about a lot. Although right now, we're fortunate that mental health is way more part of the dialogue now in our sort of cultural and social landscape. In the music industry, that dialogue has been so stifled, to the point that, like, look, I've been, like I said, I've been doing this for long enough that I've seen so many people get burnout, so many people leave the music industry because of drug problems, alcohol problems, all of the rest of those problems. It can be very difficult. And I think the most important thing is to have a dialogue. Like I did say, it's absolutely cardinal to be on time, to be punctual, to be on it, all of this stuff. But and that was all within this sort of bracket of communication. And I think the most important thing to remember is to communicate. No one is going to disrespect you if you say, look, I'm feeling burnt out right now, or I can't do this. I think it's really important to do that. And even speaking from my own experience, I lost my dad and my management asked me to go on tour very, very soon after that. Asked me to leave the country that I was in and fly back and do a load of shows. You have to know where you stand. You have to be able to say, this isn't right for me. I'm not going to be able to do that. Or look, being organized and being on it doesn't necessarily say like, oh, I'm feeling really shit, but I'm going to be there and I'm going to make it work at my expense. It just means saying like, look, I really can't do this. We're going to have to push things back. And you might just have to change things up. It might make scheduling quite difficult, but if looking after yourself is what needs to happen, that there's nothing more important than that. In the same way that nothing is more important than your art. Like you wouldn't sacrifice career stuff in place of your art. You wouldn't change your practice, your artistic practice, in order to get signed, because that would never make you happy. You wouldn't turn up on the day if you were feeling really burnt out. You should just say, yeah, this isn't working for me. Someone else will be able to help out if you're absolutely needed, or if not, you'll find another way to make it work. At least you're being honest. That's still creating community and really meaningful interaction. If you were to tell me, I know I said I had this one strike thing, so let's use me as an example. I'm a real hard ass, and you've said like, I can't show up today because I'm feeling really West. I wouldn't go, that's terrible, you're out. I would say, I'm really, really sorry to hear that. I really hear you, I really respect you, and I'm really grateful that you told me that. And if I or anyone said anything otherwise, you shouldn't be working with them. That's why I was sort of saying the music industry can be really tricky. People are there to make money off you once you get to a certain level. But that's when you weed out the people you don't want to work with. Music industry is going through changes. It's for people like us to be really honest and authentic and and stick to our guns. I hope that answers your question, but I think the most important thing is just communicating.
Thank you. Like, yeah, that really helped. Yeah.
Very, very good question as well. Thank you for that. Well, any other questions from anyone else? I guess I'm running ahead of time. I just talked so fast. Yeah, has anyone else got any questions?
Yeah, I've got a
Oh, you're
breaking up.
yeah, you are, but now I think you're back.
Okay, cool. I can type my question if that's easier. But just thinking about all the like branding, sort of more the marketing side of it, or like yeah, the like promotion, marketing, and branding. Obviously there's a lot of thinking about how other people perceive you or how they're gonna perceive you in that. And I'm quite an anxious type, and so I think that kind of thinking can be a little bit like I spend a lot of time trying not to think about that so much. And I really understand, obviously, that it's questions you have to ask yourself, but I was wondering if you had any advice on sort of managing that, on like not getting too personally caught up in others' perceptions, but still, managing them.
That's also such a good question. Thank you. I'm going to go back to the slide as I answer this, because what I think maybe I miscommunicated what I was saying. You know, how do people perceive you is definitely that is such breeding ground for anxious thoughts, and for sure any creative who puts themselves out there is anxious. What I'm saying, what I should have said is, how do you want people to perceive you? Who are you as an artist? I'm not saying think about what, oh man, what is everyone going to think about that, or like how is it perceived? I've just done a thing, like I've just done a post, I've just released a track, are people going to like it? It's not that. It's as you're developing stuff, what do you want people to think about? Rather than thinking of how, that might be a better way of phrasing it. Rather than thinking, how are you perceived? What do you want people to think about when they see your stuff? Don't worry about what they think about you, because, you know, people who resonate with you on a level, they will care about what you do. You shouldn't worry about what they think about you as a person, but you should think, rather than thinking of how does the world perceive me and my art, how does my art make the world feel? What questions are they going to ask themselves? Or often I think about journalists. If I'm thinking about stuff, I'm like, okay, what questions are they going to ask me? I don't, like, to be honest, I don't give a shit what they think about me. Of course I do. I'll get caught up in it, whatever. But I don't really give a shit about that. I give a shit what questions they're going to ask me and how I can communicate to the world and say what I want to say. You should think, how can I get people to think about the things that I want them to think about with my art? You don't have to get really meta about it, but just on like a base level, just think about the setting and the context and the musical language and whatever it is, whatever that pertains to specifically, those questions. Don't worry about what they think about you, in my opinion. I'd think more about, how does this compare with artists that I love, in the sense of what's their message? What's my message? What am I going to make people think about, really? That's the thing. Does that answer that in a way?
Yeah, that's a really helpful reframing. Thank you.
No, thank you. I'm glad you asked that, because I totally, if you hadn't asked that, I totally would have said that in a way that would have been misconstrued. And it's not about getting caught up in that perception of what people think about you or how you present yourself. Like I did use the sort of the suit analogy of people like latching on something. People may do that, but just think about, as long as you're authentic and you're presenting yourself in a way that's real and that you've thought about it, like, what is it going to make people feel? Then you're cool. You know, as long as what you're doing is like is like meaningful from your perspective, you're blessed. That's my bottom line, really. I wouldn't get caught up in any of that. And in terms of managing anxious thoughts, I would just say, really importantly, step back from social media. You can engage with those platforms, but the more time you spend on that, and the more you think that you need these things to build yourself, the more those foundations become shaky as well. It's like I was saying, you have to build your artistic practice. I have said, like, you need to build all your skill sets. these are part of those things. But if you get caught up and you think like, I'll only make it when I have X amount of followers, or I'll only make it when these things happen, it doesn't actually work like that. It does, you know, I know that like I have been in situations and know people who have all of those things, and it never really slots into place the way you think it will. So don't get caught up on it. Spend more time doing the artwork, say what you need to say. If you really enjoy social media and stuff like that, for sure, spend time on it. But I know from a lot of dialogues I've had with other anxious artists as well, is that it can really weigh you down. And a very, very important piece of advice that was constantly bandied around within my community is that you just spend less time on it and spend time engaging with the people that are meaningful to you. Like growing your fan base in that sense will only have a limited lifespan. It's useful for sure. It's a tool. It's a tool, and it can become an asset, but don't let that define you, and don't let that direct your musical pathway. It's just something that's happening there. I hope
Thank you.
that yeah, pleasure. I hope that
Yeah.
I hope that answers. If you have any other questions, like actually, if anyone has any other questions, and if you don't want to voice anything now, don't feel compelled to speak like publicly. If you want to ask any questions, I'm going to make my email address available to you guys. So you know, for a little bit, you guys can drop me a message, and if you want to discuss anything, I'll also send a slideshow so that you guys have that and you can refer to it, because I've had like, and I actually maybe I'll even add more detailed stuff, I'll see, but like having these things from previous mentors of mine have really helped me refer back to. I'll be told all this stuff and I'll go, yeah, amazing, this is great, I feel so good and I feel so empowered, and I'll go into a campaign, I'll be like, what am I doing? I don't know, this is so confusing. Having that stuff written down just means that you can come back to it and you can ask yourself those questions, because for sure you'll deviate. We all do. I do as well from these things. It's just good to know that you can come back to questions that can ground you as an artist and can remind you that on the very base level, like I said in the talk, the very, very most important thing is being an artist. That's you, and that's what you do. There's all these many facets, but the foundation is that. So yeah, cool. Anyone else? Any last questions, or are we?
I have a question.
Yes, yeah, go ahead.
In your experience, what has been, would you say, the biggest challenge in navigating the music industry?
I think the biggest challenge, I need a second to think about this. The biggest challenge in navigating the music industry, I think, you know what, I think with all of the stuff that I've talked about, is the biggest challenge is not getting caught up too much in the other stuff. It's knowing that these things are assets. So I talked about leveraging assets. I talked about all these things. These are things that are like, they're like currency, right? Money doesn't define you, but money helps you get to where you are. By creating assets, you create you create currency for yourself, but it becomes very easy to get caught up in creating these assets. Like I was just saying to Sydney a minute ago, like the social media thing, not getting caught up. It often feels like these things define you. I need to get to this next step. I need to get to this next level. I need to, or you can get caught up, and you can pick any asset and you can just totally lose your career in that thing. But actually, it's important to focus on at the bottom, at the very, very bottom line, is that you're an artist. Your artistic practice comes first. You as a person, as a human being, as a, you know, emotional and physical and mental, you know, living being, you're the most important thing. Never ever sacrificing that, like I just said to Odessa and also to Jordan. And not getting caught up. I've explained all of these things because I think it's important that you understand them. I'm not saying you need to just get totally caught up in all of them and you have to do all these things. I'm just saying, if you understand that these things, this is how the industry works, then at least you know, and you have that knowledge, and you don't get caught up in them. They become your tools. They become tools in your belt and your arsenal to use. They don't become things that you use as crutches and that you hinge yourself onto. And I think that's the lesson that I've learned the hardest way, because I think it becomes easy to think, oh, if I if I just do this thing, I'll get to the next level, or if I just do this thing, I'll get to the next level. The next level is always invisible. You'll never know when you're there, but you'll be there. You know, you'll get there. It'll just happen. And I think that's been the sort of that's been the thing that's hardest to learn. So I think this is another very good question, and a big point that I would like to very clearly summarize is that navigating the facets of the music industry, like I've said in the slide, doesn't mean you have to get caught up in all these things. It means you explore these things. It means you learn these things. You allow them to become your tools, and you can work with them and let them help you. Don't get caught up, and don't think that you'll only make it once you're super good at this thing or whatever. And like I said about the roles, sorry, I'm going off here tangentially, Rosa, but with the roles, if you find skills that you'd really like to build on, you don't have to be the best. You don't have to do anything the best. You just have to find the things that make you the happiest, and then the path will become clear. So yeah, that's it to answer your question, sort of tangentially, but yeah, anything further from that?
No, thank you.
Pleasure. Any other questions? Yeah, so sorry, go ahead, Lucine.
Okay, I don't really know how to phrase this or if it's a question, but so I'm gonna be releasing my first single like before the end of the month. And I guess like it's sort of been a long time coming because I had music out and then like I just took it all down and decided to, I guess, rebrand and stuff. And I think the community thing is really important to me, but I feel like because of some of the experiences I've had with people that I had like close personal relationships with and was trying to formulate, you know, something that was like meaningful and real, they just didn't pan out for different reasons. And I guess like I've just been very tentative and kind of like weary, and then also like now it makes me very unsure of how to approach things or allow like a community to be built. And obviously because I haven't been putting myself out there, I don't really, well, I have like, I know I have community in a sense because when I do perform, like I get really great responses and feedback, and so I know there's something there, but I just haven't like, I guess, tapped into it, whatever the case may be. So I'm not really sure what my question is, but I guess I'm just like, what kind of advice do you have for just like navigating that field? Because I know community is such an important thing, and you like drove that home. And yeah, so I'm just like, still feel like a lot of what I'm doing is just very solo, and I don't know how to, I guess, build that trust or build that community or really be comfortable with fully putting myself out there now that I'm going to release a single.
Yeah. This, well, congrats on the single, firstly. And secondly, this is a good question. I totally hear where you're coming from. I think this goes back to the point that we were discussing with Jordan about depletion. Both Jordan and Odessa, we touched on depletion. And I think another really important point that I didn't even build into the slideshow about the music industry is what it means to be burned by the music industry, because it's an industry like any other. And I think it is, you know, it's going to have ups and downs. And I'm sorry that you've had this experience. It sounds tough, but the thing that I can say with absolute certainty is that oftentimes, you know, the reason that we keep going isn't because the feedback is so good. You know, feedback is great, but feedback will always be mixed. Some people will love what you do, some people might not, whatever, but you know, most importantly, you love what you do. And I think this question of how do we continue building community when you've been maybe hurt by it, or when you've been when your position's been destabilized a little bit, is a good question. I think the most important thing is to just, a really good skill that will come with time in the music industry is learning to bounce back. You know, and this does come with a single release. You know, I've had this recently, I've had this in the past. You expect things to happen, and you know, like I said, even in the slideshow, sometimes the impact of a single when you put it out may not happen then, it may happen way later. It's about being really, you have to be free, you have to be ready to let go of that thing, I would say, and not get too caught up in that. It also, going to Sydney's point, don't get too caught up in it, because you've worked on this thing and then you release it, and then there's this whole thing. This is a big point. This is another big topic that's not talked about in the music industry, which is like that point of like decompression when you release music and you're like, right, it's out there, and then it can be quite overwhelming. And I think it's an amazing thing to do. Putting out music is what fuels the music industry. It's what we all do, and we're all sharing it. I think you just need to be free, and you need to be happy that it's out there. And for sure, once you put it out, don't be, even if you've been in a position that's made you feel kind of shaken or destabilized, don't try not to be destabilized by it, but move forward and try and find constructive ways to use your single to find your community. Cool, I've put out a single, maybe there hasn't been any impact. I'm not talking about you, myself. Maybe there hasn't been any impact, but what can I do with this single now? Who can I share it with? Who can I send it to? You have to be, in a way, sometimes you have to be quite lawless with how you share it. Just share it with people, share it out. Don't just do a post on Facebook and Instagram and say, cool, everyone knows about my song. Because to be honest, most people will miss that. And if they see it, it might not register. You know, I've sent stuff to, I like, even sending stuff out to people, you have to be prepared. This is also part of the music industry. You have to be prepared to have a bit of a thick skin, and for lots of people to not respond to you. That will happen to me. That happens definitely at my levels higher than me. People like not responding. It will happen, and just and try to not be too shaken by it. If you do feel upset, that's completely fine. You just got to be kind to yourself, take a step back, but just be proud of what you do and share it. Send it to promoters, send it to people, try and build community, send it to friends, see who engages with it. But just, I think the community building aspect of this single is that you've got to be ready to take it forward. Your job doesn't end at making a single and releasing it. Your job really starts there. You know, you've done probably half the work actually at this point, and it feels like this is kind of what I was saying in this sort of what it means to be an artist. You've created music. That's a very fundamental part of what you do. And now you just got to share it and get it out there. You don't need to get caught up in it, but you want to share it and you want people to hear it, and you want to build community. So if you can find an authentic way of doing that, I think that would be really helpful to you. And it might, the way that is may not be totally clear to you, but I think that as you start doing things, it will become clearer. This is the other big thing. Like in the music industry, things, just because you can't see something doesn't mean it isn't there, and doesn't mean that the potential of something happening for you isn't there. The more you try things, the more things will become available to you, and the more community will come to you. It's just about trying. It's kind of like wading through murky water. It'll just become clearer as you continue doing it. I hope that's helped. I hope that hasn't been too tangential and too sort of hypothetical, but I think like, just don't be scared to share it once it's out. Also, don't wait for the response and then go. I wouldn't wait for the response. I would just share it whilst you're hot on it and whilst it's out. I think that's an important thing to do, and to be proud of it. It's amazing that you're sharing your music and you're ready to release it. That's a very substantial thing to do. So yeah, I think that's great. Let me know if I have or haven't answered, or if you've got any more questions.
Yeah, that's seriously helpful. Thank you so much.
Pleasure. So I've done a lot of talking. Has anybody got any other questions, anything that they'd like to ask, or anything from my talk that I may not have realized I may have communicated in a way that seems scary or overwhelming or off-putting? Because I don't want to leave any of you guys feeling disempowered. I want you guys to feel good and feel like you have knowledge to go forward. Not that the industry is out to get you, but if you know how it works, you guys are all good as artists that care about what you do. You're gonna be good out there, I think. So if you guys have any other questions now, please feel free to fire away, or if not, you can, like I said, you can email me.
I actually have one more question. It's about like kind of like music distribution or like trends and stuff. I'm just sort of thinking, like, when I came into this program, part of like one of my goals with this program was to kind of start adjacent club night and a micro record label alongside with my EP launch. But then, like, the more and more I learned to this program, the more and more I kind of learned that that's a lot of work, and like I currently don't really have the capacity to do that. And I'm just wondering, like, when it comes to self-publishing and stuff, like, when is a good time to like kind of like, would you recommend self-publishing, or I guess being independent, like when is a good time to like start reaching out to like independent record labels for help with like actually like distributing stuff?
Good question. So it depends what sort of what I'm going to use size in inverted commas, what size record label you're going for and what stage you're at. If you've got the tracks finished and ready and you want to get them out there, so distribution can be two ways. If you're setting up your own label, you'd be working with a distributor who is working with you as a record label. You then, Odessa, as an artist, are signed to your own label. It's a bit complicated in that sense, but yeah, so I'm gonna just look at that for a minute. If you were to do a distribution deal with someone, I'm in both a distribution deal. I have my own label and I'm also signed to a label. So I have both of those things. Setting up your own label means long term you own all the rights to your music. Long term, it's a very useful thing to do. It puts you in a much stronger position. But short term, you would want to license your music to a record label because going back to the point of leverage, they have something they can offer you, which is potentially contact or money in terms of paying for a radio plugger, which is usually about $1 to $1.5 grand a track, or paying for promotion or paying for any of those things, that you're leveraging that off them and you're giving them your music. So you'd want to be in a position where you're like, actually, this is going to benefit me. I'm happy to go ahead and do that because I know long term I won't be with them forever, but it will benefit me. You'd go to them where you'd go to a small label, or there's small labels who might not give you any money, but a really amazing label, and they resonate with you on a level, and you think these are the people I want to put music out with. I feel them. They're my people. And that's a really cool thing. You'd go to them usually with finished music. You wouldn't typically send demos. You can with bigger labels, you would send demos because they're then going to offer you money to finish them. If you're going to a label that's going to offer you an advance of maybe anywhere from 5 to 10 to 50 grand, they're then going to give you that money to finish those demos. But if you have the capacity to finish the songs yourself, you won't be owing anyone that money. That advance is money that you're going to owe the record label back, and you will have to pay that money back, not out of your pocket, but out of being an artist and out of still doing stuff and doing activities. So like I was saying, there's a trade-off. But if you think that will benefit you long term doing that, that will also help. That, those deals aren't bad. So it's just thinking about where you're at. So with the EP launch, are the tracks ready?
Yeah, well, kind of. Like, I feel like I'm gonna do a mixing and mastering job on them by myself. And like, I would say they're pretty much finished. It's just that like, I'm not sure if I want to release them publicly, or if I want to like go and like just share like the private SoundCloud links / Google Drive links with MP3s until I find someone willing to distribute them.
Yeah. Right. So, I mean, in terms of the songs being finished, I wouldn't say like, you don't need to send like fully mixed and mastered songs to a label. Just as long as the tracks aren't gonna like undergo any major overhauls. The tracks are done. Mix definitely would help, but mastering, I wouldn't worry about too much. Labels usually pay for this anyway. So I think it's up to you. It's where you feel with it. I think you don't need to necessarily take a specific stance on that. I would say you can do both. I would say what I would do, and what I have done in the past, is send it out to loads of people. And again, going back to Lucine's point, don't be hurt if people don't get back to you, and don't be hurt. Like, even again at the stage that I'm at, and like having worked with very big producers, had labels just ignore emails and reject and not answer back. It's a very, very normal thing to happen. You just have to keep going and then decide what's best for you in that moment. set yourself a timeline. Again, this goes back to being organized. Say, right, it's December now, by March next year, I want to get the EP out and I want to do the first club night. That gives me 6 weeks of deciding. I'm going to send out emails, and if I don't have a decision by 6 weeks, I'm going to release it on my own. And then in that 6 weeks, you can decide, right, who are the distributors that I could work with? Am I going to go for an online distributor like CD Baby or DistroKid? Am I going to set up a label and go for that path? You have 6 weeks to decide, and you can do that. You've given yourself time. And then in that 6 weeks, maybe a label will come back to you. It's just being prepared. And in doing that, you're just going to learn more about the industry as well. I think it's a very useful thing to do, not necessarily to say, I'm going to release with the label, because that might not work. Or maybe they'll come through in the last minute, but at least you've done your homework. I think it's a useful thing to do. So setting yourself, being organized with it and setting yourself a timeline, and the club night thing sounds cool as well. You can just line them all up. And I think just make sure that you're doing it in a way that works for you, and you're not waiting forever. Because I also know people who've waited, and I've done this as well, waited to release records for over a year. And by that time, you're as an artist, you're in a different place. So you've got to respect that part of your artistic self as well.
Yeah, like, no, that actually like helps a lot. I think like with this incubator, everything's been like so fast paced that like I kind of felt like I need to keep up this fast pace and like do everything like bam, bam, bam. But like I think it's going to be a bit more sustainable to give myself a bit more breathing room.
Yeah, you've got to take your time with stuff. Take your time with it, but it's just finding that middle ground. Like, I think setting yourself, like I was saying, I plan my year a year in advance, at least maybe 18 months, but that just gives you leeway to do things. And it means like, okay, cool, at this time next year, you're going to be working on another project. So you want to have this wrapped up by then. As an artist, you don't want to be living in the past and releasing a retrospective album a year later, do you? So it's like just setting yourself these things and giving yourself breathing room, especially between all of that stuff, I think is very important. Yeah, I hope that's helped.
Yeah, it's been really helpful. Thank you.
Great. Any other questions from anyone else? We've got a couple of minutes left, or is everyone happy? Wow, you guys had questions. You came through with the questions. I thought I was going to be left here with nothing to say for 40 minutes. I'm really grateful. I'm really grateful for all of you, and I'm really grateful you all asked such good questions. You've helped me flesh out the way that I was thinking about this as well. And I think everyone's questions they've all bled into each other. They've all worked together. So yeah, I'm blessed for that. Thank you guys. Yeah, so any other questions, or are we gonna call it a wrap today? Yeah, okay, cool. Well, I guess we're gonna wrap it up. Thank you guys.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Thank you so much. It was so good.
Pleasure. And like I said, I'll have my email shared. If you guys have any questions you didn't want to ask now, or you prefer to email me, I'll keep my emails open for all of you. And yeah, and I'll share the slideshow. Cool.
Where will we get your email? Will it just come through the university?
Yeah, I'll send it to them just so that they can clear that that's okay, and then I'll get them to send it to you guys with this along with the slideshow, because I went to the chat. But yeah, blessings to you guys. Thank you all. You've been great, and thank you for the questions. And I look forward to seeing all of you at the show and seeing you all perform.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Bye.